What if the emptiness you feel isn't from lack of effort, but from lack of alignment? What if you're not burned out because you're doing too much, but because you're not doing what you were created for? What if purpose isn't something you find, but something you choose to live out every single day? In a world obsessed with productivity, performance, and platforms, many of us are still quietly asking, why does this feel so hollow? We've got the titles, we've got the trophies, we've checked the boxes, and yet there's still a whisper in the soul that says you were meant for more. Not more noise, not more applause, not more validation, but more meaning. That's where purpose begins. And here's the truth, purpose isn't a destination, it's a direction. It's not just something to achieve, it's something to align with. Purpose isn't for the privileged few, it's for every single person created with divine intentionality. And yes, that means you. Purpose isn't just for the platforms or pulpits, it's for your everyday, your ordinary moments, your unseen obedience. It's the quiet yes to God when no one's watching. It's showing up to life not just to exist, but to live with impact. Because when you start living with purpose, everything changes. You stop chasing validation and start standing in truth. You stop comparing your journey and start committing to your assignment. You stop asking the world who you are and start listening to the one who made you. That shift changes everything. Suddenly, your job isn't just a paycheck, it's a place to reflect God's character. Your relationships aren't just companionship, they become a calling. Your struggles aren't just setbacks, they're sacred setups for what God wants to do through you. Purpose gives pain meaning, it gives waiting value, it gives your journey weight, and that weight, it grounds you, it roots you, it sustains you when storms come, and they will come. But with purpose, you no longer fear the storm. You know who you are, you know why you're here. You know what you've been assigned to carry, and you carry it with clarity, with courage, and with calm. Because the truth is, you don't create your purpose, you receive it. You don't earn it, you uncover it. It's already in you, planted by the God who formed you, equipped you, and set you apart. And when you surrender to that purpose, when you start living aligned instead of scattered, focused instead of frantic, life becomes less about proving and more about partnering with God to build something that lasts. Not something that fades with trends, but something that echoes in eternity. And that kind of life, it's not just possible, it's the one you were made for. Purpose changes the way you see everything. You begin to view your time differently, not as hours to fill, but as opportunities to fulfill. Your work becomes sacred. Your conversations become intentional. Even your struggles begin to feel purposeful, not because they're easy, but because they're not wasted. And that's the beauty of purpose. It redeems every part of your journey. Nothing is lost. Not the missteps, not the failures, not the seasons where you felt invisible or overlooked. Purpose pulls it all together. It weaves the highs and lows, the joy and pain, into a story that carries weight and blesses others. When you live with purpose, you stop living as a victim of circumstances and start living as a steward of your calling. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, how is God using this to shape me? Because you know that becoming the person you were created to be requires fire. It requires pruning. It requires trust when the path feels unclear. But you also know that on the other side of obedience is transformation. Purpose leads you through the refining. It asks you to let go of who you thought you had to be, to become who you were always meant to be. It requires courage, to say no to comfort, to step away from shallow success, to break cycles of fear, complacency, and comparison. But the reward? It's depth, it's clarity, it's power, not to control, but to love, not to dominate, but to serve. That's what purpose gives you. The power to endure when others quit. The power to forgive when bitterness makes more sense. The power to lead with humility and love with boldness. And that power is not from you, it's from God in you. He's the one who gives your yes its strength. He's the one who breathes on your obedience and multiplies your impact. Because here's the truth. Purpose is not about spotlight, it's about surrender. It's not about being seen, it's about being faithful. Some of the most powerful lives will never make headlines, but they are making waves in heaven. They're raising children with integrity, serving quietly, giving sacrificially, praying when no one else sees, showing up again and again with no recognition. But purpose sees. Heaven sees. And the reward isn't just in eternity, it's in the way purpose transforms your present. You walk differently, you think differently, you choose differently. Because when you're rooted in purpose, you no longer live by pressure, you live by peace. Not because the world gets easier, but because your soul gets anchored. You know who you are, you know what matters, you know what you're building. And it's not a brand, it's not a moment, it's a legacy. One day at a time. One step at a time, one purpose-filled yes at a time. That purpose-filled yes, given in ordinary moments, is what builds an extraordinary life. Not extraordinary by the world's standards, but extraordinary in impact, in depth, in faithfulness. You don't need a stage, you don't need 1 million followers, you don't need to go viral. What you need is to be available, to be obedient, to be consistent. Because consistency in purpose creates credibility in your calling. It's not about being the loudest voice, it's about being the truest one. The most grounded, the most present. And presence changes everything. In a world full of distractions and noise, people are hungry for peace, for authenticity, for someone who doesn't just talk about purpose but lives it. You become that person, not by trying harder, but by trusting deeper. Not by striving, but by staying close to the one who called you. He called you to be a light. Not flashy, not perfect, but faithful. That faithfulness starts with small decisions. Choosing peace over performance. Choosing truth over trends. Choosing alignment over applause. Because when your purpose is clear, your choices become easier. You know what to say yes to. You know what to walk away from. You're not driven by pressure, you're led by peace. And that peace becomes your power. It keeps you grounded when everything around you shifts. It keeps you soft when life tries to harden your heart. It keeps you focused when distractions come knocking. And they will. Distractions will try to pull you out of purpose. Fear will try to silence you. Doubt will whisper that your voice doesn't matter. But purpose doesn't need validation to be powerful. It just needs your yes. Your quiet yes is louder than the world's noise. Your consistent obedience is more impactful than occasional hype. Your hidden faithfulness is more valuable than any spotlight. Because when you live with purpose, you walk with heaven's authority. You speak with conviction. You serve with joy. You endure with grace. And people will notice. Not because you're performing, but because you're present. Not because you're impressive, but because you're intentional. Your life becomes a sermon. Your posture becomes your platform. Your purpose becomes a light in someone else's darkness. That's how transformation spreads, not from stages, but from souls fully surrendered. This is what it means to live with purpose. To live awake. To live rooted. To live ready. Ready for whatever God places in front of you. Ready to respond with love, truth, and boldness. Ready to reflect the one who called you everywhere you go. And when you finally embrace that significance, everything about how you show up in life changes. You stop measuring success by what you accumulate and start measuring it by what you contribute. You're no longer defined by how busy you are, but by how present you are. No longer driven by hustle, but by heart. And that kind of living is rare, but it's what the world is longing to see. The world doesn't need more noise, it needs more presence. More people who carry peace in the chaos. More people who reflect truth in a time of confusion. More people who live with purpose, even when it's inconvenient. Because purpose isn't always glamorous. Sometimes it's gritty. Sometimes it looks like forgiving when no one says sorry. Sometimes it's choosing the hard right over the easy wrong. Sometimes it's staying faithful when nothing feels fruitful. But it's in those unseen moments that purpose is forged. In the hidden places, in the quiet yes, in the painful surrender, God is shaping you into someone who can carry the weight of His glory. He's not just preparing you for what you'll do. He's preparing you for who you're becoming. And who you're becoming, that's the true reward. Not the platform, not the applause, not the visibility, but the version of you that reflects Christ more clearly. The version of you that walks with compassion, leads with humility, and serves with joy. The version of you that sees life not through the lens of what's missing, but through the lens of what's eternal. Because purpose gives you perspective. It reminds you that success without significance is empty. That busy doesn't always mean fruitful. That peace is worth more than recognition. And when you live with that kind of vision, you don't get distracted by detours. You don't quit when it gets hard. You don't compromise for comfort. You endure. You stay faithful. You keep building, even when no one claps, even when the room is empty, even when the breakthrough hasn't come, because you trust that every seed of purpose planted in faith will bloom in its season. And in that trust you rest, you breathe, you find joy again. Not in outcomes, but in obedience. Not in applause, but in alignment. Not in doing everything, but in doing the one thing God has called you to do today. That is the power of purpose. It's the power that turns ordinary moments into holy ground. When you live with purpose, even the smallest acts begin to echo in eternity. A kind word, a helping hand, a silent prayer, a quiet sacrifice. None of it is wasted. Because God doesn't measure impact the way the world does. He looks at faithfulness, he looks at heart, he looks at the motive behind the motion. And when your motive is aligned with heaven, your motion creates ripples that reach farther than you'll ever see. This is why purpose is worth pursuing. It refines your focus, it deepens your faith. It teaches you to live not just with passion, but with precision. You don't just wake up, you rise with intention. You don't just speak, you speak life. You don't just move, you move mountains. And all of it, every step, every sacrifice, starts to make sense in the light of eternity. Because you're not just building for now, you're building for forever. Purpose teaches you that legacy isn't what people say about you. It's the light you leave behind. It's the lives you've touched, the faith you've inspired, the truth you've stood for, even when it cost you something. And sometimes living that way will feel lonely. Sometimes it'll feel like you're the only one choosing the narrow path. But that's when purpose becomes your anchor. It reminds you that you weren't called to be popular. You were called to be powerful, in grace, in truth, in love. Powerful not because of your voice, but because of your surrender. Because the most powerful person in the room isn't the loudest, it's the one most aligned with God's will. That's the kind of strength that confuses the world. A strength built in surrender. A strength forged in stillness. A strength that doesn't strive but trusts. And that strength, it multiplies. It empowers you to mentor others, to encourage when you're exhausted, to lead when you feel overlooked, to give even when you're empty, because you know your source is endless. That's why purpose is dangerous to darkness, because a person who lives with purpose doesn't need circumstances to be perfect. They just need a word from God and the faith to move on it. So keep moving, keep trusting, keep planting seeds in obedience, knowing that in God's time, they will bloom. And when they do, you'll look back and realize it was never about what you built, but about who you became. Never about the destination, but about the daily decision to live with fire, faith, and focus. That's how lives are changed. That's how legacies are written. That's how heaven touches earth, through people like you, living every day with purpose. And the beautiful truth is this: your purpose doesn't end when the spotlight fades. It doesn't lose value when no one notices. It doesn't become irrelevant when the season changes. Purpose is not seasonal, it's eternal. It adapts, grows, matures with you. As you evolve, as you heal, as you go deeper with God, your purpose gets clearer, sharper, stronger, more refined. Because living with purpose isn't about achieving a goal, it's about becoming someone who reflects heaven on earth. And that becoming? It's daily. It happens in the unseen hours, in the quiet faithfulness, in the unwavering decision to keep showing up when you feel invisible. It's there that God does his greatest work, not just in what you do, but in who you're becoming through the doing. The kind of person who walks with integrity when no one is watching. The kind of soul that shines without shouting. The kind of heart that's soft enough to love and strong enough to endure. Because when you're living with purpose, you're not easily shaken. You've built your life on a foundation deeper than public opinion, than fleeting trends. You've built it on truth, and that truth sets you free. Free to live without fear. Free to create without comparison. Free to walk your own path without apology. You're no longer living to be liked. You're living to be aligned. And alignment unlocks peace. Not the temporary kind, but the lasting kind. The kind that says, I may not know what's next, but I know who's leading. The kind that keeps your hands open, your heart soft, your steps steady. This is the invitation to step into each day with intention, to let purpose guide your priorities and priorities. to let God define your direction, to live like your life matters because it does. And if this message stirred something in your soul, don't let it fade. Subscribe to Think Fresh Daily. Share this word with someone who needs hope. Join a growing community of people choosing purpose over pressure, alignment over achievement, and faith over fear. Because together, we're not just building moments, we're building movements. Movements of courage, movements of clarity, movements of God's kingdom. You're not alone. You're not behind. You're exactly where you need to be, right here, right now, with purpose pulsing through your veins and heaven cheering you on. This is your moment. Live it fully. Live it faithfully. Live it on purpose.